There's a certain kind of person who can stand in the middle of absolute chaos and somehow stay steady. The room is loud, emotions are flying, people are panicking, arguing, reacting, and they're just calm. Not fake calm, not checked out, real calm, the kind that makes you stop and wonder, how are they not losing it right now? You can feel it when you're around them. Their presence alone slows things down. They don't rush to defend themselves. They don't raise their voice. They don't need to win the moment. They just breathe and observe, like someone who's already survived this exact storm before. And here's the wild part. This calm isn't weakness, and it's definitely not indifference. It's not that they don't feel things. They feel everything. Anger, sadness, fear, uncertainty. They just don't let those emotions grab the steering wheel anymore. Somewhere along the way, life taught them a lesson most people are still learning the hard way. Reacting to everything makes you a prisoner of everything. That quiet strength you're sensing, it was earned. Through pain, through loss, through realizing that panic never fixed a damn thing. And once you understand why some people reach that state while others keep unraveling, you'll never look at calmness the same way again. They don't just appear calm out of nowhere. That's the part most people miss. That steadiness you noticed in the beginning didn't come from luck or personality. Came from experience, from being overwhelmed once, then twice, then so many times that something finally clicked. See, calm people usually weren't calm at all in the earlier chapters of their lives. They were the overthinkers, the ones replaying conversations at 2 a.m., wondering what they should have said differently. They cared deeply, sometimes too deeply. They tried to manage every outcome, fix every problem, keep everyone happy. And every single time they tried to control the chaos, life pushed back harder. That's when the lessons started to sink in. Slowly, painfully. Panic didn't help. Fighting everything didn't help. Reacting instantly didn't make things better. It usually made them worse. So at some point, they stopped trying to control the storm and learned how to stand inside it. That's the shift. That's where real calm is born. Calmness isn't the absence of emotion. It's emotion paired with understanding. These people still feel anger, but they don't let it explode. They still feel sadness, but they don't drown in it. They feel uncertainty, but they don't let it knock them off balance. Inside their mind, there's this quiet reminder saying, "You've survived worse." And that voice isn't optimism. It's memory. Most people assume calm means cold, but it's often the opposite. Calm people are usually the most compassionate in the room. They can hold space for others because they're not fighting their own emotions anymore. They've learned that not every battle deserves their energy. Not every insult deserves a response. And not every storm deserves fear. But here's where it gets really interesting, because there's an actual psychological reason why some people can pause while others spiral. That ability to pause, that's not accidental. It lives in the brain. And once you understand what's happening up there, the whole calm versus chaos thing starts to make a lot more sense. Deep inside the brain is the amygdala, the part responsible for fear and emotional reactions. When something feels threatening, an argument, criticism, uncertainty, it's the amygdala that hits the alarm. In most people, that alarm takes over the whole system. Heart racing, thoughts spiraling, words coming out faster than they should. Reaction happens before reasoning even gets a chance. But in people who've lived through emotional intensity, something changes. Their brains learn. The amygdala still sends signals, but it no longer hijacks everything. The prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for logic, perspective, and decision-making, steps in faster. There's a pause, and that pause is everything. That moment between feeling and reacting is their superpower. It's why they can hear something hurtful and not immediately strike back. Why they can sit in uncertainty without filling the silence. Why, when the world gets loud, they can still hear themselves think. Wisdom doesn't shout, it waits. And calm people have trained themselves to wait. What's wild is that most of them didn't learn this from books or therapy sessions. Life trained them, through heartbreaks that changed them, through moments where reacting quickly only made things worse. They got tired of apologizing, tired of explaining themselves, tired of cleaning up emotional messes they didn't need to make in the first place. So they reached a point where peace became more valuable than being right. Silence became safer than shouting. Breathing became smarter than blaming. And even then, their calm wasn't easy, because sometimes the strongest people are carrying the heaviest storms inside. They just learned when to hold it together and when to release it. Timing matters to them. They know there's a time to act and a time to feel. A time to stay strong and a time to break down quietly when no one's watching. But there's another layer to this calm that almost nobody talks about, and it changes how they see the entire world. That calm doesn't just change how they react, it changes how they see. And that shift in perception is what really separates them from everyone else. While most people see chaos, calm people see patterns. Where others see problems, they see lessons. When something falls apart, they don't immediately label it as failure. They step back and ask, "What is this trying to teach me?" That doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. It means they've learned to zoom out instead of getting trapped in the moment. They've trained their minds to look at the bigger picture. Experience taught them that emotions lie when they're loud, but truth shows up when things get quiet. So instead of reacting to every wave, they observe the tide. That's why they can lose something important and still say, maybe this had to happen. Not in denial, in understanding. The calm person sitting quietly in the corner, there's a good chance they've already been broken once. They've felt unseen, misunderstood, questioned their worth in silence. And somewhere in that breaking, they realize something powerful. You don't heal by living inside the wound forever. You heal by learning when to step out of it. That's why calm people don't chase validation. They chase meaning. They don't need to prove they're right, because they'd rather understand. They've learned that reacting to everything keeps you trapped, but perspective sets you free. The calmer they became, the freer they felt. Psychologists call this response flexibility, the ability to choose your response instead of letting emotion choose for you. Calm people don't suppress emotion. They channel it. They let it move through them without letting it destroy them. That's why they can stay composed in a crisis and fall apart later in private. Not because they're fake, but because they're intentional. They understand timing, and that understanding gives them balance when others are losing theirs. But here's where it gets even deeper, because for many calm people, this calm started as something else entirely. For a lot of calm people, this calm didn't begin as wisdom. It began as survival. Early on, they learned that reacting loudly didn't change outcomes. That expressing too much emotion often led to being misunderstood, dismissed, or hurt. So they adapted. They learned to stay composed because it felt safer. Calm became their armor. Silence became their shield. At first, it was protection, a way to keep themselves intact in environments that felt unpredictable or emotionally overwhelming. But over time, something interesting happened. That restraint turned into awareness. That emotional distance turned into depth. What started as defense slowly evolved into strength. That's why calm people are often incredibly self-aware. They know their triggers. They recognize their patterns. They don't need constant noise to feel alive. They're comfortable in stillness because stillness isn't empty. It's clear. It's the sound of someone who's finally stopped running from themselves. When they walk into a room, they don't demand attention. They don't raise their energy to compete with the noise. Somehow, they lower the noise just by being there. You can feel it. That quiet confidence that doesn't need to be proven. It's not loud, but it's magnetic. And that calm is not emotional numbness. It's emotional maturity. They still feel deeply, sometimes more deeply than anyone else. They just don't let emotion spill everywhere. Their sadness becomes reflection. Their anger turns into clarity. Their fear transforms into faith that they'll figure it out. They've learned something most people haven't yet. Arguing rarely changes minds, rushing rarely speeds things up, and worrying rarely prevents anything. So they let go of what drains them, not because they don't care, but because they finally understand the cost of caring about everything. But there's a shift that truly seals this calm. A realization that changes how they respond when life hits hard. That shift happens when they stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "Why wouldn't it?" Not out of defeat, out of clarity. Calm people understand something most people resist for years. Life doesn't single anyone out. Pain isn't personal. Loss, rejection, disappointment, it happens to everyone. And the moment they stopped fighting that truth, half of their suffering disappeared. Most people add a second layer of pain by resisting what's already happening. They argue with reality. They replay it, resent it, wish it away. Calm people don't do that anymore. They let the emotion be there without turning it into a war, because they've learned a deep psychological truth. Pain without resistance is just sensation, but pain with resistance becomes suffering. So instead of collapsing when life gets heavy, they lean into perspective. They separate what's happening outside from what they allow to happen inside. The world can be loud, unfair, unpredictable, but their inner space is sacred. They don't let every external event dictate their internal state. That's why calm people feel like they live in a different dimension. They exist in the space between stimulus and response. That tiny pause where they decide whether to feed chaos or feed peace. And every time they choose peace, they reinforce it. Calmness isn't passivity. It's control at the highest level, the control of self. They know when to act and when to wait, when to speak and when to walk away, when to explain and when silence says more than words ever could. And here's the thing, this calm isn't something they found. It's something they're creating moment by moment. In late nights when their thoughts won't slow down. In conversations where they choose restraint. In situations where they refuse to repeat the same emotional mistakes. But there's still one more layer to this psychology that changes how others respond to them, and it's powerful. This calm doesn't just change their inner world, it changes how the world treats them. When you stay calm, you become harder to manipulate. Emotional reactions are easy to predict, easy to push, easy to exploit. Calm people don't give that leverage away. Their restraint confuses chaos. Their pause disrupts manipulation. When everyone else rushes to react, they wait. And in that waiting, they see things others miss. They notice motives beneath words, patterns beneath behavior, truth beneath noise. That's why calm people rarely regret what they say or do. They give situations time to reveal themselves. They understand something most people overlook. Time exposes what emotion hides. Because of that, they respect time deeply. They don't chase quick closure or force understanding. They allow things to breathe. They know that rushing clarity is the fastest way to misunderstand. Patience, to them, isn't delay. It's wisdom disguised as restraint. If you ask them how they stay so calm, they'll probably shrug and say something simple like, "I stopped fighting everything." But what they really mean is they stopped fighting life. They stopped trying to win every argument, control every outcome, rewrite every past, and predict every future. Trust is the secret ingredient here. Not trust that everything will be perfect, but trust that they'll handle whatever comes. That belief doesn't come from ego. It comes from surviving enough storms to know they can survive the next one too. That's why calm people radiate quiet confidence. Not loud, flashy confidence, but the kind that feels grounding. You feel safe around them, like there's no rush, no need to prove anything, just space to breathe. And here's the truth. This world celebrates noise, but it's the calm ones who carry the deepest wisdom. They listen more than they speak. They see through the chaos because silence sharpens perception. But even calm people aren't unbreakable. They still get shaken sometimes. And what happens then is what truly defines them. Even the calmest people lose their balance sometimes. They get angry. They doubt themselves. They break down when no one's around. Calmness was never about being unshakable. It's about knowing how to return. That's the difference. When emotions hit, they don't cling to them or run from them. They observe them. They sit with them long enough to understand what's really going on underneath. Then they let them pass. Awareness, acceptance, release. That's the cycle they live by. They understand emotions are waves, not walls. You can't stop them from coming, but you don't have to let one wave define the entire ocean. Happiness shows up, pain shows up. Both are temporary visitors. Calm people welcome both without letting either take over the house. That's why they often feel timeless, like they've stepped out of the race everyone else is running. They're not chasing peace anymore. They've built it. They've learned that silence can be safer than noise, that understanding feels better than arguing, and that slowing down doesn't mean falling behind. You'll notice they simplify their lives. Simple routines, quiet mornings, a walk with no headphones, a few minutes of stillness before sleep. These aren't habits by accident, they're anchors. Repetition gives the mind stability, and calm people protect that stability fiercely. There's a paradox here too. Calm people are often deeply emotional souls. They feel intensity, but they don't erupt. Their sadness turns into reflection. Their anger turns into clarity. Their fear turns into trust. That transformation is emotional maturity in action. They've learned that expression doesn't always need an explosion. Sometimes strength looks like holding emotion gently until it dissolves. And once you understand this, you start to see calmness not as personality but as a practice. One that keeps evolving. We're almost at the core truth now, the part that ties everything together. Here's the core truth most people never realize. Calmness isn't something you're born with. It's something you build. Every calm person you meet is choosing it over and over again. In moments when it would be easier to react. In conversations where silence takes more strength than speaking. In situations where walking away protects more than winning ever could. They built it during long nights when their mind wouldn't shut up. During mornings when quitting felt tempting. During moments when they were misunderstood and chose not to defend themselves. Not because they didn't care, but because they cared about peace more. If you ever asked a calm person what changed them, they'd probably say something like, I got tired. Tired of overthinking. Tired of explaining. Tired of carrying emotional weight that didn't belong to them. So they started treating peace like oxygen, non-negotiable. The world rewards loud success, but it rarely celebrates quiet strength. Yet it's the calm ones who can sit in stillness long enough to actually hear what life is saying. Silence sharpens perception. In that quiet, they observe without judgment, and that's why they understand people so deeply. Calm people don't just hear words. They hear intention. They don't just see behavior. They see the wound behind it. They listen to understand, not to respond. That's why talking to them feels grounding. You feel seen, not analyzed. Understood, not judged. That kind of presence takes strength. Takes discipline. It takes emotional intelligence most people are still developing. And once you reach that level of calm, something beautiful happens. You stop chasing peace because you realize you are it. There's just one final realization that seals everything we've talked about. That final realization is this: peace isn't found at the end of the journey. It's found the moment you stop running. Calm people understand that life will always test them. There will always be noise, pressure, uncertainty, and moments that try to knock them off balance. But they've stopped expecting life to be fair, easy, or predictable. And that shift alone removes so much unnecessary suffering. When something goes wrong, most people spiral into "why me?" Calm people think, "Why not me?" Not with bitterness, but with acceptance. They know life happens to everyone, and resisting that truth only multiplies pain. So instead of fighting reality, they move with it. They've learned to separate the external world from their inner one. The world can be chaotic, loud, even cruel, but their inner space is protected, sacred. They don't let every comment, every setback, every misunderstanding decide how they feel inside. That space between stimulus and response, that's where they live. That's emotional intelligence in its purest form. Calmness doesn't mean they never fall apart. It means they always find their way back. They return to stillness again and again like muscle memory. They've failed enough emotional tests to finally pass them. Not because life stopped challenging them, but because they stopped reacting the same way. So if you've ever been told you're too calm, take it as a compliment. It means you've learned something powerful in a world addicted to reaction. It means you can see the storm without becoming it. It means you've found strength that doesn't need to shout. Because calmness isn't emptiness. It's fullness without noise. It's power without aggression. It's emotion without chaos. And in a world that's constantly screaming for attention, that kind of calm is rare, and it's real.